Hey, what's going on out there? I'm Sean Devine. Today I've got a new tutorial for the beat makers and producers out there. Those of you who are creating 2-track mixes for your instrumentals and you want to achieve loud mixes, you want them to compete, you're sending them to an A&R or you're posting them on your website or sending them to an artist or a songwriter, and you really want them to pop and be impactful and compete with commercial records, but you also want to have the flexibility of adding the vocals, obviously, and then making sure that you are kind of leaving things in a place that if you need to do mastering, you can do that properly. So I'm going to show you just kind of my general approach and techniques for this when I'm working with an instrumental or something I produced, and how I kind of get the loudness in my 2-track mix. So let me just go ahead and play what I've got here. Again, this is just a beat that I've produced, and then we'll talk about what we're doing on the master and how I'm getting it loud and commercial ready. All right, so that gives you an idea of what we're working with there in the beat mix. And you'll see that my faders are pretty hot, but only the kicks in the track are showing us a little warning indicator. That's actually not clipping. It's just saying, hey, you might want to be aware of this, because I'm having to kind of push those to get the transients where I want them. But I'm not substantially clipping anyway. But let's talk about just what I've done here. My approach, again, is to achieve the loudness in the mixing stage, especially for my production and my instrumentals, because I don't want to have a lot of guesswork when it comes to the master. I want to know what things are sounding like, and just through experience, whenever in the past I have waited to achieve loudness, to achieve the impactfulness, it will throw you some surprises in terms of affecting the sound. And once you've gotten used to the mix, you don't want the master to significantly change it, except for slightly enhancing things and making it better. As I've said in a lot of my other videos, my mixing and mastering processes are kind of one and the same. I'm usually doing both the mix and the master. So again, I'm okay with feeding the levels pretty hot into the master and getting the level there. So a lot of people are going to tell you to do it the other way around. I'm not saying that mastering engineers aren't important and they don't have a place, but if you can get comfortable with achieving most of the sound in the mix, then the tools that we have available nowadays, you can do what you need to do for the master to get it competing commercially. So let's talk about what I've got on the master. It's very simple. You know, when I first started and up until a couple of years ago, I used to just not do anything on the master. I may clip it a little bit, but I would just bring everything down before I export multi-tracks. But for the 2-track, I want to make sure it's not clipping, but I still want it to be really loud. And again, I don't want to push a limiter. I don't want to rely on a limiter, because ultimately the limiter will change the transients and the dynamics of the track quite dramatically. So the idea is to leave the master as transparent as possible and just add a little bit of whatever it is we need. So for this beat, again, I'm not trying to make it sound like a song. I don't want it to kind of be too full in all of the frequencies, because we've got to still essentially add vocals. So all I've done is just a slight boost at 10K just to give it a little bit of brightness in the synths, and I've compensated in terms of level to make sure we've still got room. But then let's go to the important part. I have Ozone on here, and what we're doing with Ozone is, first we're feeding the vintage limiter with the analog mode on, and this is just sweetening things up. It's saturating the sound a little bit. It's not affecting the balance of the mix. The next thing in the chain for Ozone is we have a little bit of post EQ. and I'm just boosting some of the low end. I'm making sure that our sub frequencies have a little bit of a high mid boost just to play back better on hi-fi systems. I've got a little bit of a boost at 200, and that's it for that. And then finally our maximizer, which what I have is essentially just a brick wall limiter. We've got a ceiling of minus 0.1, which means it's just going to keep everything from clipping. It's going to keep it below 0. And then I'm pulling the threshold down just slightly so that we can get everything at the loud point we need to compete with commercial records. So let me just go ahead and I'm going to pull both of the plugins that I've got on the master up, and we'll just bypass them. I want you to notice that when I turn these off, the balance and the essence of the mix does not change. So we'll just turn them off. And we'll turn them on. All it does is just make it a little bit louder, a little bit punchier. But again, since we're not relying on this stuff to kind of give us the core of the mix and what really is impactful, we don't have to try and push it too hard. We don't have to try to do too much in the mastering stage. So that's really my approach in terms of getting the volume and the levels and the impactfulness for the 2-track. Now I would just balance it with this processing on here, the brick wall limiter and the EQ. Now, when I go to do my multi-tracks, now this is what's going to give you flexibility. If you have an artist who does a song, they get access to the multi-tracks for the instrumental, then they go back into the studio and someone may do another mix with the vocals and the instrumentation and then do a full master of that track to give them flexibility and let them do what they need to do. What we first want to do is just take everything off the master. We don't want to do any limiting, any processing for this particular stage if we're not going to be using the 2-track. So we'll turn those off, and I'm going to turn my automation off on the stereo output. And what I'll do is I will just bring down the master fader to a point where we're not clipping the master. So somewhere in there, we're in the green. I'm just bringing it down to where we're not clipping. You see it clipping right here. This is just a side chain. There's no output on this kick. So that's actually not hitting our mixer at all, other than a side chain trigger. The rest of the stuff, like we talked about before, I'm not clipping, except for the kicks are just a little bit loud. But once we turn that master down, that's not going to affect it either. So when we do this, now when we go to export all of our multi-tracks, it's going to, again, give a little bit of headroom, and it's going to allow the mixer / mastering engineer who's dealing with the vocals to have that flexibility. So you don't have to worry about, clipping the master bus on your instrumental. This way you've got the best of both worlds. The people out here who have the 2-track, they have a loud, competitive mix that's not clipping, and all they have to do is just bring their vocals to the level of the 2-track and maybe just put a brick wall limiter, again, something that's not going to affect the dynamics and the transients of the beat, but just to keep the vocals from clipping over that beat. That's all they have to do. And then the folks who want more flexibility in the studio with vocals, they're going to have what they need, and a mixing and mastering engineer can do their job. All right, y'all, so that's my approach on getting loud, impactful mixes for your 2-track instrumentals and beats. If you have any questions or comments about this, feel free to leave them below. If you learned anything in the video, please like and subscribe, and we'll talk to you soon.